Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Squadcast. I'm your host, Phansora. With me are the usuals, CardGamer and Shadawx, and also special guest, TheCupIsMine. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Very excited after the competitive announcement, and then seasonals just happened, which is always fun. How are you doing, Cup?
Straight chilling, man. I spent this weekend watching my teammates do a bunch of stuff. Decided to kind of join as a spectator this time and kind of enjoy it from the sidelines. And it was obviously with our team doing extremely well. It was super fun to watch all weekend. So it's been good. How about you, Shadawx? How are you doing?
Chilling. The usual. But yeah, pretty much the same.
Guys...
Cheering for everyone in the top cut and all that. Especially happy for our winner.
Yeah, the first two times
Americas.
Yeah, the only Eastern, non-Asian player to do it, right? Because there isn't one in Europe.
Yep.
It's only it's Nezik,
Yep.
Flying Fish, and Floppy are the only people who have won multiple seasonals, right?
Yeah, and Floppy's the only one who's done it
Pimping
back
Ho
to
as
back.
well, no?
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't Pimping Ho won too as well?
Oh, yeah.
No, I think it was Ping Ping Ho, not Flying
Yeah,
Fish. I
not
had
Fish.
players mixed up. My bad. Yeah.
Mhm.
Ping Ping Ho and Nezik, not. Yeah.
OG Hearthstone player.
Yeah.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Isn't Nezik from another game as well? I don't know.
It's really hard to keep up with
players.
APAC stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
APAC also has a lot
Exactly.
of name changes like constantly. So
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's really hard to keep up.
Yeah, but
We got to keep up by changing our names back to them.
yeah,
Well, that's great for brand recognition, making sure that people can recognize the players and what they're doing and seeing what they're going on. But we've got a packed schedule, don't we? There's some pretty big stuff that was just announced a little while ago.
yeah.
Yeah, we've had two big draws. We had the roadmap, and then we had the competitive announcement. So, which one you guys want to start off with?
I might as well start off with the roadmap. That came out first, and it kind of
Sure.
bridges us into the other announcement. So you want to go over that?
Okay,
first?
so yeah, we basically got the last section of the last year's roadmap expanded on. So we got the LOR exclusive champions. We have more of those coming in. Someone who punches, I believe.
Yeah. Someone
Somewhere, yeah. Someone
sort
who
of
punches. We have a
brawler,
new person
yeah.
who punches. It's,
Mhm.
it's not set. It's maybe set stat apparently. So who knows? We have Path of Champions. Okay. Competitive.
we have
New
cross
formats
shard
is the last
question
thing.
mark.
Hmm?
We have
Cross
cross
shard
shard
question mark. In a few years, there's like a lot of question marks on Craft Shard. Is the problem?
There's a lot of question marks, but it says play with people outside your region on the roadmap.
They said Cross Shard. Yes.
I think for context that they could come up with a much more elegant solution than trying to implement cross shard again.
I agree.
That was just a mess last time. I think it will probably end up being something more to do with if you have an account in EU, it's easier to create a Smurf account somewhere. That'd be so much easier for them to implement than it would be for them to try and get everyone on the same server again. But there's some really cool pie in the sky ideas on there. But I think the main thing that came out with the roadmap was the cycling, right? What they're going to go expansion into balance, into variety set, back into expansion every time. So we have more of a set cadence now than we've had before, where it was going to be like one balance patch during an expansion and then the next expansion. But things can change, obviously, throughout that, as you see with like stuff that's gone on over the last year. But I think having that consistency, especially from a casual player perspective, that you know what's coming every single month and can get excited about it, especially if you're someone who's like a fan of archetypes that haven't gotten as much support and don't just want to see new stuff all the time. I use my brother as an example all the time as a casual player who's like, I want to come on and I want to play deep. But when I come on and I play deep, even in normals, I'm playing against things like Seraphine all the time, and I can't have fun because the cards haven't been updated for where we are today. So having things like variety and seeing them specifically implement that, I think that's both cool on the competitive side because you get new cards and new things to kind of tinker with that update archetypes, but also for just the player base as a whole, being able to play your favorite stuff in any way that you want is awesome to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And just touching on that, specifically, we're going to be getting the live balance patch first in in about a week.
Yeah, so
and then it's going to be
start
variety
that
and expansion.
cycle
And
in a week, right?
Yeah, that'll be the
With
beginning
balance
of the
patch.
cycle. So on the 8th
And then
is when the patch will hit. And then 1 month from then will be the variety set.
And then in April, we're supposed to be getting the end of the competitive beta, which we'll get into in a second, as well as the next expansion. And then the month after that, and rotation. Month after that, we go into the patch and start the cycle again. I'm really excited to have this cycle, though. I think, like, we have a lot of champions right now, so it'll be really interesting to see areas of the game which have been somewhat explored like be fleshed out more. I think there's a lot of cool champions and like archetypes or like card packages that have just a little bit of support that I'd love to see more. And the other thing that I think is really nice is it's a way to only add a little bit to the game and like have a more controlled changing of the game, which I think is something that we've really lacked for a while in Runeterra. It's kind of always felt like we've been stuck in these extremely stale metas, or we're playing in metas where a balance patch hits, the entire meta flips. Expansion hits, the entire meta flips. And it'll be kind of nice where we might be in a little bit more of like a controlled meta as like things are paced a lot more naturally.
It really feels with April coming on that it's kind of a reset in the direction of the game. If you think about last year on how they set up, right? You saw the director left, new people came on board, there's a lot of changing of the guard, and being able to set that vision up takes time. Like, you don't just get to come in and everything gets changed, right? You have a roadmap and you have execution things that come into play, but it really feels like now with specifically April, I think that's almost did Rising Tides come out in 2020? Is that when it was launched? Right. It's like 3 years to the date, like in April, that they're kind of going to go set up on a new vision for what everything is going to look like. With things like rotation, I know that there's content creators who are excited about it. You look at someone like BBG has specifically said he's coming back to LOR as soon as rotation happens. Again, I use some of the casual players who are like, the game's expanded so much and the card pool is so wide, I don't know what I'm playing around anymore. Just with so much stuff, and things like Seraphine obviously exacerbate that, where you get more random card generation and you have new things that are coming out, and being able to kind of slim down the card pool a little bit outside of Eternal format and in Standard makes it a lot easier also for newer players to come into the game, because you have less cards that you have to worry about in that Standard format. Obviously, it's still a very young game, and overall the cards aren't as big as something like you might see in MTG or in Hearthstone, where things are wide. But you think about it from someone who's coming in and maybe not as established, especially with Hearthstone's like competitive environment kind of being cut almost completely, that you want to be able to have something like that in place. So I think it's like a really good time for lore, and I think they set up their vision quite nicely, especially when we talk about competitive, it being quite inclusive across the board for everyone to kind of just get in and without many barriers to it.
Yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, April is also the anniversary of Runeterra, right? So it all kind of pieces together, how they went from I want to say improvement to improvement to improvement, like over the course of each year. It's neat to see.
It does feel like with all the changes coming, this is like when they've finally put everything in place. They've got all 10 regions that they want out. They've got like a proper cadence. They've done their like standard Eternal split. This is Legends of Runeterra 2 that they're releasing. So like they seem set moving forward.
I don't even know if I would call it Legends of Runeterra 2, but it's almost like they kind of launched like Runeterra early, Like it's almost like we've just like
it's been a pre-release.
We're almost it's almost in beta, right? We're getting there.
Yeah. But like, I mean, we just like didn't have so much of like the strategy and like design space just like in the game like 3 years ago. Like, just think about like all of like these mechanics that just like weren't in the game that were introduced through like Targon and then Shurima and then Bandle City and then like Runeterra champions and then like weapons, like landmarks. It's just there's so much that has been like introduced into the game that it's almost like a completely different game from then. And I'm really excited, like Cup was saying, about like building up the vision and where it goes from here. Like, we have a lot of like there's a lot of freedom that Riot has to take the game in a lot of directions, and hearing they are on a PvP slant with how they're approached instead of a PvE slant like they were last year, and seeing what we're about to get into with like how Ruben's been tackling competitive, I'm just like so excited to, you know, see where Runeterra is going.
It's hard to come up with a proper vision, right? When we came into it at the beginning, it's like, is this going to be a competitive game where everyone goes off? Is it going to pop off in esports where everyone's going to want to watch, etc.? Is it going to be more casual focused? Is it, who is the audience for this game, and what do they want, and what's the best way to serve them in a sustainable way moving forward? And I think that they finally kind of nailed who their audience is and how to engage both the casual and competitive player base in a way that works for everyone. So I'm excited for what's coming. And even though we joke about Path of Champions, it's cool for those casual players to actually get those updates that are coming in. Because last year, a lot of people might have been like upset that, you know, some of the balance things weren't going to happen because they were promised some stuff. The fact that they still are going back and revisiting aspects of it is a good sign that, you know, that dev resources aren't stretched as thin as people might believe.
Yeah, it kind of bodes well for if we're getting like you know, standard Eternal split plus alternate game modes with which we'll get to. Just the fact that they're at least doing a decent job here balancing, you know, their PvE mode with their PvP players. It bodes well for the future when they have multiple different PvP formats to try to balance.
Yeah, especially with like their new, you know, monthly patch cadence expansion variety set kind of thing. It means they're always, you know, they're always going to be paying attention to the meta, to what cards feel good, feel bad, what cards players want to see, and like which champions are, you know, need to be reworked, because they did say they are planning on reworks for some champions with these patches if needed be. Not like a whole like re-release of a card, but more just, you know, changing a mechanic of how a card works, things like that.
Think of Leona, for example, right? There's a great example of one that was done really successfully. Swain as well. You saw a lot of Leona even in Swain representation in the tournament this last weekend, and that wouldn't have been possible without the changes. Swain without Overwhelm was just like not a champion in modern LOR, and Leona basically got, she was always paired with Demacia before, but she basically got all the Demacia mechanics just like slapped directly on her, and it made her a lot more flexible outside of that region. So the reworks are promising. They've shown they've had success in doing them really well. And again, I know we're just like kind of giving Riot a clap here for all the things that they've done over the last little while, but I think that we're equally critical when things aren't going well. But this has all been really exciting.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good time to move into the competitive changes, which is probably the thing that we are all the most excited about here. I think I'm curious to hear like what your guys' initial perspective was on it, and then I think we can break it down and go in depth for the viewers. But I'm really excited about it. I have like a few concerns and things like I'm not 100% sure about, but I don't think it's anything that won't get worked out by the time it goes live, especially with how active and receptive Ruben has been just everywhere. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, it all looks good. I like that it's a bit more consistent, because it was basically, you know, previously you had seasonals every 2 to 3 months, and then you had smaller grassroots tournaments, which were like, if you wanted to compete in them, go ahead, but they didn't matter for anything. Like they're all in their own little bubble. So it's nice to have such a like more consistent tournament schedule. The only thing I have like apprehension on is like making sure they balance out the like trophy rewards you can get from participating in these. Make sure it's like not able to be abused just by like dumping a bunch of time, and like no matter how well you do, you just like win because you just put time in it. So yeah, I think seeing the beta season will be, you know, once we get past the beta season, we'll have a much better idea of like how well their system is working. But it seems very hopeful.
Yeah, I agree. Pretty much the same as what you guys have said. Couple concerns, but not many. Overall, it just looks really good. I think the only real concerns I've seen from most people were, you know, just balancing out the trophies, and like, if I just spam dailies every day, will I just automatically get these buys or not? Which, I mean, going by the trophy rewards, it seems like you shouldn't, but that's to be seen. And then overall, just the Runeterra points balancing as well. Like for example, ladder, how much will it actually give compared to winning an open or simply just topping an open, right? Like, I know they said that ladder, like, it's good that they still gave ladder some sort of meaning and incentive. They did say that you won't qualify for Worlds solely if you play ladder, which is also kind of neat. Meaning you have to play in like these opens or even the grassroots. I think they said they're giving them Runeterra points as well. So it's all some. So it's all going to be interesting to see how it's all like scaled and balanced, and if it's done well.
I think accessibility is huge here too. We mentioned before, like there's a seasonal every 2 months, and then there's like Worlds afterwards, and that's like 2.5 months for like seasonals, right? You think about the average player and how often that they're able to play with stakes at mind outside of ladder. You know about grassroots if you're super competitive and you're active in things like Discord, but I think about myself even like in 2020 when I first started playing. I had no idea what any Discord was or anything like that. I only knew about stuff that showed up in client. And for a lot of the player base, and you want to get them engaged with things like this to make them care about Worlds and care about other stuff, it's super important to have these things in client, in game, readily available. Aligning, like for some of the people maybe who haven't heard the competitive announcement before, we now have access to like daily tournaments. It puts it in best of 3 formats. Those daily tournaments help feed into like kind of like tiebreakers or buys, which would happen in monthly bigger tournaments, which then feed into ultimately Worlds. So as you do well in each of those, it helps you move forward to qualifying. There's other things like grassroots and ladder that will have smaller implications for that. Where it's super important is one of the largest complaints coming into this year was, or in the last few years, is best of 3 was maybe had half of an implication, like half of your feeder format into Worlds, and then half of it was from like ladder. Really, it was like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But because the tiebreakers were also from ladder, that meant that it actually had an outsized impact because the majority of top ladder players were the ones that were getting in further. So the new Worlds format, what it really does is align that best of 3. The format that's used in the largest tournaments and in the World Championships is going to be the majority of stuff and the things that matter moving forward on that front. Obviously, there's the time considerations as well that come into it. I don't mind it as much. If Riot's saying you play my game a lot and we're going to reward you for it as a company, I kind of get it. Like, they're like, you want to spend money on it, you want to keep playing the game a lot, and we're going to reward you with things like buys. You still got to be a skilled player at the end of the day in order to get through. It's not some random pleb is just going to get 2 buys and all of a sudden get to the top. I mean, that's the kind of vision that they sell you. But being able to do that is like super important. And I think overall, just this is the first time that we've had someone solely in charge of competitive. If you look at the way that Worlds was formatted before, they kind of came together in a couple meetings, but there was no specific person who had the title of like in charge of competitive. And Ruben has a ton of background in MTG competitive and winning a lot in there and seeing the scene grow from that perspective and being able to apply it to lore. I love the way that they've done it. We don't have any understanding of prizing yet, but personally, I think that compared to setting up the structure and making sure that it's accessible and that it rewards good high-level play in the format that matters most is the most important thing out of anything. And I think that they really nailed it on the head with how they structured it.
Yeah. I do want to touch on that ladder bit because that's something that I really appreciate.
I was going to say, should we like go through the announcement like part by part for people who don't know, like touch on what dailies are, like opens, and then how it all ties in?
Yeah, we can break it down further
because like that way we'll get into the latter part as well, right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll get back to that.
I kind of figured we'd give like a quick rundown, like great, or like, well, it's okay, but like people just went like off, so it's all good. But we'll go ahead and break down.
I realized like halfway through, I'm like, oh wait, man, some people might not know what's going on. What's an open? What's a daily? What's a pleb? I don't know.
Yeah, so, there's basically like 2 new formats or tournaments that are going to be in client. There's the dailies, which are kind of like Gauntlet, but they're going to matter. And then there's the Runeterra Opens, which are basically seasonals, but they're called Runeterra Opens now. Gauntlets, or sorry, even when I say gauntlets, Jesus. The Rumbles are, you can play whenever. and
they're gonna have a set
opens
period
happen.
of time.
Yeah.
They're not
So not like whenever. Yeah.
Okay, not.
Yeah, right now
Someone else
it's
should do this
4
announcement,
p.m.
maybe.
Yeah,
to
okay.
2 a.m. But Ruben said that they were going to most likely change that to accommodate for other time zones. So like for the AM shard folks, like that time is like kind of screwy for OCE. So Ruben's gonna try and finagle that to adjust for them. I don't know exactly how that's gonna play out on other servers, but
yeah. So
it also gets a little late on
EST.
Eastern
It's a bit wacky. It ends at 5 a.m. So it's what 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. something like that, which like could be okay. But then thinking about it, that means it's like a 6-round gauntlet thing, which might not take long.
Like it very much depends on like whether if you start at 7, you'll go to 5, which is probably not it. If you start at 7, you'll probably go to like who knows. So it'll remain to see how long they actually are, because compared to something like seasonals, it's all asynchronous. You basically start playing when you want to play. I know this is a big deal for the Open as well, Runeterra Open, is that you don't. It's not like seasonals where it's like, okay, at like 1 o'clock you have your game, then at 2:05 you have your next game, and at 3:10 you have your next game. It's much more of it's like if you have time, you can play then, and you can play your games and just like hop in queue, and then you can like play 3 games. Go have dinner, or go to the gym or whatever, and then come back, play your last 4 games.
Another thing,
and that helps a lot with accessibility too.
Yeah, another thing to mention about that as well that Ruben said is like, for the daily rumbles, is if you say like it does start late for EST, right? Say like you start at 7, you're doing like a best of 3 format, it's running late. If you don't have time to finish and you have to like leave mid run, when you start the next day, as long as it's the same format from the day before, you will start from where you left off the day before in your same run.
The only thing is you can only enter 1 a day though. So if it carries over, you can't enter once you finish that run.
So the thing with the rumbles, so the way why they matter is because you have a rewards track, much like the region rewards track from just like the normal game. It gives you various prizes. I know the important one is you get a buy for the Open.
Yeah.
That lasts for your entire season. So previously gauntlets, your Prime Glory. If you got your Prime Glory that season, you would use it for that one seasonals, and then you have to stock it back up. Well, this is just if you make it for.
You would use the Prime Glory for the last chance gauntlet to get into seasons.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like a big finagling to get in through the extra part through seasonals. It was just like a whole bunch of extra stuff if you didn't want to get top 700 masters. Whereas now the Prime Glories are essentially like your buys or your seedings in the old system.
Because you have 3. There are going to be 3 opens per season.
And how the opens work is there's, like Phansora was saying, there's 3 opens per season, and the opens are going to be 2-day events. They're going to be a day 1, which is going to be everyone goes ahead and queues up. You play until 8 wins or 3 losses. That's the reason why the Prime Glories can be so important. Each Prime Glory, you need a 1 less win. So if you have 1 Prime Glory, you're essentially playing last seasonals format with a buy, where you need 7-2. Get 2 Prime Glories and have even more of an edge, or you can need 8-2 if you don't have any. And then that's the use of the Prime Glories, which it's a really big edge. I mean, like, I'm sure we've all heard like the top seasonal players, the people who top cut every time, like everyone says they do it because they have 7-2 seeding. So the daily rumbles are going to be pretty important to get these buys. I think like just getting the first buy is going to do a lot. So
yeah, and then day 2 is simply just going to be single elimination. Everyone who's made 8 wins just faces off against each other. Also important to note for the beta season, there's only day 1. And then going forward, in like their normal seasons, it's going to be the 2-day event. And also numbers may change since it's a beta season. They're looking for feedback. So they're still tweaking things. Like, for example, I think Ruben might have mentioned if it seems to be really popular, it might be 9 wins, or they might cap how many people are in the day 2 portion.
Mm-hmm. And Ruben's mentioned,
I think I saw somewhere
different ways
he was going to change.
Yeah.
He was considering changing the number of people who'd be playing day 2. So yeah,
Yeah.
he said their current target is 64 players for day 2, but if there's more players, they might go up to 128. So double that.
And that's why the beta season is so important, is so they have this feedback and they know how much interest there is, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's important that we all play if we have time, and then if you have feedback, to communicate it. Because, like I mentioned earlier, Ruben's just been really active. I know, like, I see him responding to everyone on Twitter. I think he's been active a little bit in, like, the main Discord, and I don't really go on the Reddit, but I'd be very surprised if there aren't writers active on the Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely give your feedback if you're a competitive player or you just, like, care about this. So
yeah. And what else?
Go ahead. The other part of the announcement for competitive is alternate game modes. We're finally getting Singleton back. Not actually.
Something better.
We're getting...
Yeah,
we're getting... You can make a deck out of any cards. Any regions. Just do what you want. It's going to be interesting how absolutely broken that game mode is, and whether we're going to have, like, interesting builds or, like, just Leona Cat with champion strength. Anything could happen.
Yeah, for clarity, these dailies, they can be any of these formats, and they usually last a week. Yeah. And like Phansora was saying, this unlimited format is one of them, and you can get your trophies from it for the week.
Real quick, those 4 formats. So there's normal best of 3, everything that has been all the tournaments up till now, that same format. Champions Unlimited, so normal deck building with like 2 regions, except you can put as many champions as you want from those 2 regions, but you still can only put 3. Free build, that's the crazy one. 30 to 75 cards in your deck, up to 10 regions, unlimited champions. And then there's standard best of 1, but you played as a best of 3, apparently.
Yeah, that one was
so
a bit
each player's bring 1 deck, but you play it to a best of 3.
I don't know if it's that, or it's you bring 3 decks, ban 1, and then you play a best of 1.
Well, it says no picks or bans.
2 decks.
It says no picks or bans, best of 3.
Oh, then it is that.
But it also says standard best of 1, but best of 3. So I actually don't know.
Who knows? It is a format that you can play from
that you will gain trophies for.
It just I think they would make the most sense if it's just bring 1 deck, you play like 2 out of 3 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, kind of weird.
I do think like an interesting change to this would be if they want to make this like a more interesting format, instead of just playing the same exact deck, you do sideboarding. So bring 1 deck of 50 cards and you play with 40 of them at a time. So you have your 50 card list and you can swap them out as long as you end up with 40.
I think it ends up being a programming hassle at the end of the day to do it, because it'd be like a brand new thing that they'd have to implement. It's cool and I really like it.
But we do know that you can have more or less than 40 cards, so we have the technology.
I think the free build is like super cool, because it's like one of those things that you kind of miss from playing physical card games, where like you're with your friends and you're like, you know what, we're gonna make our own rules and we're gonna do like whatever we want. And with something like free build, man, someone's gonna try and do. Is there a limit? Can you have more than 3 of 1 of each card in the deck? Because if you can, someone's gonna do like Drazot's gonna want to do.
It actually
and see how it works.
Doesn't specify.
It doesn't say that.
The other one it specifies, but for this one it doesn't say max 3 copies. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So like we just do 30 Legion rear guards and we just go full DJ.
I think I would personally guess it is still unfortunately capped at 3, just because of how your collection system works with like 3 copies of each card.
Just craft extras.
Whatever. Is it like if you have 1 copy of Legion rear guard, you can?
I have 600,000 shards. If I cannot craft my 4th Legion rear guard, we're gonna.
Oh, we actually didn't even talk about that for the dailies. There's an entry fee, by the way, guys. Just letting you know.
Oh yeah, there is an entry fee for the dailies.
Just throwing that out there.
That's gonna be interesting because, like, for us, it's not a problem and will never be a problem. For people who are like new to the game, more casual, which is what they've stated they want to market it towards, it remains to be seen how much of a barrier to entry, because it's like
they did say though they are working on it already.
A fifth. It's like a fifth of a champion. So if you play like 2 or 3 of those, you're skipping a champion for that week. So like if you're casual, that might be an issue. So
you do get things like extra XP from doing the daily rumbles and stuff. So it does help give back to some extent. And I think, like Shadawx mentioned, Ruben and the team are already looking at ways to kind of prevent that, right?
Yeah, he said he was either like they were either gonna add shards to the trophy reward track, or they would just reduce the cost overall.
Okay, because that's what they did off of the old Expeditions limited format, where if you won, so you got 7 wins, you get your full refund essentially. So you'd get cards plus a full refund if you went all the way.
Yeah, I'm curious how they do it. I think this is why I think the beta season was super smart on their end. Yeah. It allows them to experiment with a lot of numbers, understand how popular the new modes are, because you can get lost in the theory behind a lot of this and trying to set it up and make it perfect before launch. But having 2 months where you can really analyze the data and understand what's going on is awesome.
Yeah, and
yeah, there's the biggest thing is just like a volume of data from hundreds of thousands of players is just far and away going to get the best results.
Yeah, and for exact numbers, if people are wondering, it's 2,000 shards or 200 coins to enter. But for the beta season, it's reduced to 650 shards. So that's what Phansora was saying before about being two-thirds of a champ for newer people.
Sure. I was looking at the 650 and I said BS.
650 on sale.
I was like,
get your discount now while you can.
Yeah.
I think for some of the people that are interested, some of the data that they're going to look at is like, okay, how many times does someone come back after the first one, right? Where it's like, is this an engaging experience? Is this something that goes in? Because it's new, they're going to get a lot of first-time entrants, but the real question is going to be how many second-time, third-time, fourth-time entrants, and how many people end up becoming daily entrants. And how, I wouldn't be surprised if halfway through the beta, they change the number just to see what the impact is in the results. Like if they go from 650 and then move it to 500, 400, what happens? It's quite a common thing that you'll see within products just to test things and get like how much does the delta really matter? Is it actually a price concern that's happening here, or maybe it's something with the product? So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some like different stuff happen within Runeterra during that time. And again, those should all kind of just be expected.
Yeah, exactly. And the same goes for those formats as well, that they're going to be, like, for example, the free build, if everyone loves it, you'll probably see that return every month.
Free build's just going to be the earth of
free
Legends of Runeterra.
Free build is just going to be Worlds. I'm sorry, guys. Just saying it now.
It's so good.
I'm actually so excited.
I hope that format's actually fun. I hope it's not just degenerate aggro decks running rallies.
There's worse than aggro. Really, I'll tell you that
format. Now. Yeah, even if it's not fun, it'll be...
No. If it's
you like Infinite, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's Degen Infinite, I'm all here for it. What's the 6 cost follower?
There's like a million, man. I don't know.
No.
Avatar.
If I get to put Avatar in my Infinite deck, that's perfect.
I mean,
take out the rally, win the game card, put in Avatar.
I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, that's the difference between Shadawx and other Infinite players.
No, but I want to go actually Infinite.
He does go actually Infinite.
You want to be hopefully Infinite. Cross your fingers, Infinite.
I mean, if you play enough GEs.
Yeah. Enough GEs, enough promise in future. Right. Come on, there's millions of ways.
You're just not dedicated enough. But
no, you're right. I'm sorry.
Even if the free build ends up being a mess, I'm really excited for it because I think there's a lot of like really cool kind of strategical like concepts and theories that exist in like other card games that we can kind of like test out now, especially if there isn't like a card limit. There's like, I won't get like too deep into it, but like in Magic, there's like a really like basic theory on like how to define archetypes, which is like essentially playing like a really like typical like control-y like value deck where you just play like big guys, a deck where you just play like 3/3s, and a deck where you just play like 2/1s that like hit you for 1 when you swing. And like it's a really interesting like how things play out and like how things beat each other. And it would be like pretty cool to run things like that in Runeterra and see where things line up. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that stuff's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then also we get to do all the fun, like funny stuff. Like I've seen so many really interesting concepts, like 30 card deep, like 30 card echo, which are just like really just like basic, like how good do decks become when they're just like really tight and like streamlined. And then there's just like some really degenerate combo stuff, like Cat Leo champion strength, right? Like Rico released like this overwhelm pile that's just every overwhelm champion in the game, and like Battle Fury, right? Like that stuff's hilarious. So it'll be really cool to see.
You do deep and echo so that you toss your shit and then you only have echoes left.
And then you only chrono break.
Put chrono breaks in, so all your predicts are always chrono break.
I think one thing that'll be interesting. I joked about Singleton coming back, but you can actually do Singleton with free build. And I think there's like interesting space for like, especially with like grassroots, they can set their own custom rules with how like sandboxy this is.
I think that's coming way in the future, right? But that is something they want to do, right?
It's coming way in the future, maybe for in-client, but as far as grassroots are concerned, you can simply set it as your rule for like a little small tournament.
Oh, because you're saying they're going to have like challenges where you can challenge in this format like you used to be able to with Singleton?
Yeah.
I would imagine so.
Okay.
They said it's not...
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're going to say the same thing, but go ahead.
Go.
So they said they are going to have friend challenges and I think spectate as well for these. They said something about spectate, but I can't remember.
He doesn't know if they got it in the beta,
yeah.
If they pushed it or not, but it's something he wants to get to ASAP because you can do that with like an ultra rapid draw, right? So it's like one of those things that you just have to make available to do it. And I think that is so much fun.
But yeah. So I guess another thing to mention about opens and rewards track and dailies is so the trophies, like Phansora said, on the rewards track, the most, I guess, prestigious prize on them is the Prime Glories, but there are also cosmetics, you know. Titles are new and badges. And for example, what is it? Getting 6 or less wins in the open gets you the bait title. Isn't that cool? So that way, you know, when you key into someone, it says like Shadawx bait. Doesn't that sound great?
No, that's sick.
Like, I don't even want to get 7 or 8 wins for this Reckoner title. Who cares about that? I just want bait.
There's not even a day 2. Look,
that's true.
Look, I'm 0-2 scrubbing out in the beta to get my bait title, and then I'm just popping off for the rest of the opens. It's the perfect strategy.
Yeah, like, you know what? Oh, I didn't get my 2 buys for this one. Okay, just getting bait this time. Might as well.
Yes.
But yeah, there's titles which supposedly display when you queue into the game. I think they said it's not currently like in game yet, but they do want it to like display somewhere else as well. But yeah, it's like different things like Reckoner, Contender, bait. They're working on a bunch more.
Worlds 2022 winner.
They released, like a list of them, and a couple of them are retroactive. Like for example, Floppy is going to get the World Ender. What was it called? World Ender Champion? Is that just what it was called? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's top 16 and winner for Worlds both years, so 2021, 2022, and then this past seasonal World Ender.
Yeah. So those are cool, right?
Won other seasonals. Screw you.
I think this idea like comes from like if you play like Marvel Snap, people have titles in all of them, right? That come out and that got really popular as part of the report track. But if you look at the feedback that came out once the top 16 boards came out for seasonals and how positive that was for all the people that got it afterwards, it was kind of like, oh, okay, people really like this sense of exclusivity and personalization and like ability to flex in different ways. Some people want to put a contender, some people want to put bait down. And it's funny no matter how that you do it. But being able to do that is just like an evolution of like, this is how I portray myself in the game. and it allows people to connect with the game in a different way, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think in the future they're gonna do like for example, like you said, Snap has the titles. Like World of Warcraft also has those achievement titles, which you just get them for doing like random things like exploring this part of the map, or if you explore the entire world, then you get like the Explorer title and things like that. So I feel like they'll probably go down that road as well. Like for example, I've got like 1,000 wins on Shurima, and you get the title, Ascended or something, right? Like I can see them playing around with things like that, right?
Or like you have the whole collection, Shuriman Collector, or whatever.
Yeah. Like different things like that.
Shuriman Car Collector.
Yeah.
Nah, give me that Ascended title. That sounds so dope.
By the way, they actually have these in League as well.
Yeah, they added them like what, 2 years ago?
Whoa, was it 2 years? Yeah. I feel like it just came out.
Marvel Snap stole it from League?
I don't play League anymore, bro. They added it sometime between when I stopped playing for Runeterra and like when I logged in like 6 months ago to play ARAMs. Like somewhere in that time window it happened.
That's true. Completely off topic, but Valorant got a spray of the Runeterra and Heimer calculation emote.
Yeah, they're
stealing our stuff. I don't understand, man.
No.
When are we getting Jet?
Stop complaining. We need all the publicity we need.
Oh, maybe.
Oh yeah, that's what they meant. They meant like from other IPs.
Damn, Legends of Runeterra, Heroes of Warcraft, kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so titles and badges are the new like cosmetic awards. Badges, I believe, just kind of display in your profile, which is neat. I don't know exactly how they're gonna look though, because we already have like the icon. So I don't know if it's gonna replace those or what.
Probably like right below the icon.
Okay.
Or is like a backdrop.
Or it could replace an icon.
It could be a backdrop, because at least for the Kale one, they're all wings. So they could just be wings around your profile.
Yeah, so that as well. Okay. Or it could be like a backdrop to your rank, right? Like you could just put like the rank symbol like right in the center of those wings, right?
Oh yeah, possibly. But yeah.
So it'll be interesting. It's cool cosmetic stuff. Like the titles are definitely like fun. And the badges are just like cool to see. It's like a nice flex if yours is like, has more things going on it.
Yeah. And I guess that brings us into our next big topic, Worlds. How to qualify and the new format of Worlds. So I guess starting with the format is Worlds is no longer qualifiers, which was technically Worlds but not considered Worlds kind of thing, are gone. So no longer do you qualify for your region's qualifiers into the qualifying Worlds round. It's just Swiss, I believe, top 64.
No, it's group.
It's a 64-player group
stage.
Okay,
so it's not Swiss.
No Swiss.
Okay, so 64 group.
And then top 16 is double elim, which is so much more exciting.
And like with it being a group 64, it means more international play between players. So before, you'd watch the qualifiers and it's like, oh, I face this America's player I play like every day on ladder. Oh, exciting. Now it's going to be like, oh yeah, round one of the group of 64, we've got like right away, like Alan versus Yamato again, or something like that, Like no need to wait for like the double elimination cut for that stuff. It all happened right away.
Another cool thing about this format is we're finally putting in like the same amount of players from each region.
Yeah. Yeah, it all equals up, right?
EU gets one more.
Oh yeah.
oh true. EU does get one more.
After all the bitching over the last 2 years.
It's kind of earned.
Yeah.
Like,
100%
Thanks, Alan, for your sacrifice.
And
yeah. Alan walks so Aragorn could run.
No, it's really cool. I think one of the biggest gripes, I talked with a couple of people, like I talked to Pitash, for example, a lot about this last year, where it was like, okay, you do super well throughout the year, right? And you end up with, say, like a top 5 seed. And you have 1 day of double elims, and your seed really doesn't do all that much for you, despite like crazy performance throughout the entire year. And that's kind of deflating, because at the end of the day, I did some math with like the old format. And let's say you're the best player in the world, okay? Let's say you're floppy. You have a 75 to 80% set win rate on average. even with that, with the way the format was structured before, you had less than a 30% chance of making it through, just given the way that the system was in place. So even if you are like the top of the top of the line, the likelihood that you made it to the World's Finals before was still super low. So when it came down to a lot of those players coming back and saying, do I want to do this again? Do I want to come in and like put all that time in when if I'm the best, the likelihood that I'm able to go through isn't that high? It's tough. And now with the way that it is and being a little bit more exclusive in terms of who gets to go to that round, just your performance throughout the year, only having like 21 people from each region means that you have to be on your A game. Not all the time because of the way that it's structured, and we can talk about that after, but it just rewards you a lot more that once you know you're going to Worlds, you do get to go to Worlds, and it's not just another tournament with all the other people from your region that you've been playing against the entire time going into it. So I looked at it. One of the reasons I didn't even play in seasonals this time before was because I was like, I was waiting for this kind of announcement. Like, do I want to compete anymore? Do I want to put all that time in? Because to put the time in to become one of the best players, it's a lot of time once you've gone through it and once you realize what it takes to get there. And once I saw this and you see that it rewards top level play consistently while still being accessible to everyone to enter and stuff, that was all like A+ in my mind.
Well said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely agree with all of that. I think it's just a really good system for one, giving value to consistency, like you said, and then what we touched on a little bit earlier, which is like playing the same format that you're asked to play in the best of 3 format. And playing the best of 3 format also asks another thing that I think is very different from ladder, which is like a different skill set that Runeterra and Hearthstone ask of you, which like no other card games really do, which is just like it asks you to be flexible and have like a wide deck pool. Which is like in ladder, you're encouraged to play one deck and learn every matchup and learn how to skill diff every bad matchup and be as exploitative as possible in bad matchups so you can win. Like Phansora and I talked about this a lot last week before the podcast, Cat Gwen versus Lulu Jinx matchup and how he was winning it on ladder. And like you're encouraged to like figure stuff out like this. But in the new format we're moving into, instead of being encouraged to just like figure out how do I play Cat Gwen versus Lulu Jinx, like there's a lot more reason to say, well, maybe I'm not supposed to figure out how to play that matchup today because there's enough Lulu Jinx that should be going around that it just makes sense for me to build my lineup differently. And I think that's a really interesting part of the game that can start developing now. So there's just like so many layers and so many reasons why I'm just like so excited for this competitive change.
It's very skill expressive. The format changes. Whether the matchmaking and how all that works, it's probably going to get ironed out over time. But overall, just the structure of everything behind all of it allows you to flex in a lot of different ways. And I think that's going to play itself out quite nicely over time.
Mm-hmm. I think that covers most of the competitive changes, unless there's anything else someone wants to throw in.
Yeah, so how to qualify for Worlds.
Oh, yeah, that.
So there's these things called Runeterra points, which you accumulate throughout each season. And the main ways to get them is through these opens, which are the monthly seasonal tournaments, through ladder, which Phansora wanted to touch on earlier, and through grassroots, they said. So they're planning to support local grassroots, which are like community run tournaments, and give them some sort of Runeterra points distribution, which I'm assuming it'll scale like based on player entrance and stuff. And obviously it'll be only, you know, reputable tournament organizers. Like I can't just, you know, host one right now and be like, all right, CardGamer, Phansora, P-Tashus, us 4. Let's play. Free points. So
we're playing ultra rapid draw.
Yeah, whatever happened to that, huh? But yeah, so that's how the main way to qualify for Worlds is through these points. And at the end of every season, it'll be the top point earners who get their invite. And at the end of like the entire year before Worlds, the one who has the most at the end of the year will also get an invite. what's the other way? Oh, the other way is also every second Runeterra Open will award the winner a direct qualification.
I think it's third. There's three.
They said a second in somewhere. There's 3 every season, but they said they're choosing a second one.
Yeah, if you look at the roadmap for competitive, it does say month 1 open, month 2 qualifier open, month 3 open.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I think the reason it's set up like that is because the timing of when they wanted the qualifier open, they wanted
aligns with the balance.
Yeah.
Yep. So it ends up being the reason I said every 3 months, Shadawx. It's the second one every season, but it ends up like rolling over. That we'll have it every 3 months. Yeah.
It all makes sense. What else?
The other way is there's an LCQ for each region. We'll have a last chance qualifier for all the people who didn't make it, who probably have a presumed number of Runeterra points, where the winner will end up going through. What we don't know yet, and Ruben joked he was just going to get a slot machine and figure it out, get slot bot, is how many people at the end of every season will get through. Like, are they taking the top 3 from that season? Are they taking the top 2? Is it top 4? And then how many people get through from the overall year-end ones? That's still to be determined over time. And again, we have over 2 months before this stuff actually starts mattering in April. So I'm sure we'll get some clarification before then.
Yep, that's right. And then...
So it's basically like compared to last year, how last year's world qualification, there was ladder qualifying and seasonal qualifying. Those are just being streamlined into one thing, which is like combined ladder and Runeterra Open points.
Yeah, it just all goes to Runeterra points.
Yeah.
And then
last chance is basically taking the place of the old qualifier for Worlds.
Yeah,
kind-ish. Yeah.
It's not the same size, but it fits a similar role where it's like this is the final tournament. If you haven't made it in already, that feeds directly
it's probably
Worlds.
something more akin to Last Chance Gauntlet, but on a world scale kind of thing, I'd assume.
I mean, there's a lot of these type of events for like different esports, right? Like League has like the Gauntlet at the end for like the last slot for Worlds. I know like Magic.
It's a wild card match.
Yeah,
TFT
like
has
Magic,
it.
TFT has
Magic
it.
and Flesh and Blood have like this type of stuff for Worlds. It's just like an LCQ, right? Like if you almost made it but not quite, it's like your last shot.
It's just the wild card game for sports.
Yeah, and then that's pretty much it. And then the others are already decided, which was the World Ender winners plus Aragorn.
My boy Floppy's going through.
Yeah, Floppy can chill the rest of the year.
He was saying, he's like, man, I don't. He's like, it's kind of weird. I don't have anything to play for. I was like, come on, man. I was like, you just got to keep dominating. I was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
You just got to be the first American to top 2 Runeterra Opens.
Yeah. Why stop at 2 wins in a row?
Yeah, why would we just go in and just take more spots from other people? It'd be dope.
Yeah.
Just keep doing it. Qualify like 5 different ways.
Floppy Quagsire. Make your Smurfs. Yeah, and I guess...
Do you want to...
I guess Phansora wants to touch on ladder, right? As a last thing?
I was just going to gripe about ladder. So yeah, the issue we have already basically touched on all of it. It's just like laddering, I personally found was the most miserable part of playing this game. Laddering at times made me not want to play it. And I have enjoyed laddering at certain points, like as you said, like getting really deep into a single deck and finding all the ins and outs, especially in the bad matchups, and finding ways to win the bad matchups just by like knowing every single aspect of it. That's really fun. The fact that you're then punished for switching decks because you lose all that built-up knowledge about this one deck. And so even just by the fact of switching it, you don't know the ins about that deck, you're going to lose points on ladder. And that always felt bad because it punished you for changing how you were playing. Because, you know, the old mantra was just like, play one deck, and that's it. Don't switch, don't do anything else. Just play the one deck on ladder and jam nothing but that. And that's not really fun.
Yeah.
And the way that they have it now, it much more... I wouldn't say it encourages necessarily, because doing well on ladder is still there, but it's not as big of a disincentive to try to test stuff on ladder where you're going to be bringing something new maybe, against other good decks.
I think
Normals has never been a great testing place just because there was a lot of bad decks and maybe not quite as competitive. So you're not punished nearly as much for being a bit more experimental.
I think a good way to put it is like ladder is finally a place where you're allowed to like just go and practice. Whereas like if you really wanted to be a competitive player before, like you couldn't just go on ranked and practice things, or you were potentially like ruining your chance of topping seasonals. So like then you had to create an alt account, or you had to go into normals and play worse games, or you have to find people that are willing to scrim you and like willing to play certain matchups, or just like willing to just jam like 15, 20 games into you, because like sometimes that's what you need to just play 20 games of a deck, and like some people don't have the time to play 20 games into you, you know, like that's a lot of games.
CardGamer doesn't have time to play 20 games in a season. I imagine 20 games in one session. Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, as mentioned before, the fact that ladder was double dipping because it was ladder points, seasonals points, topping seasonals. Very few people could top seasonals just because there's like only 4 spots. So most people were ladder qualified or seasonals qualified. And in order to be a seasonals qualified, you need to have ladder seeding to make top cut in seasonals. So it's like 1 topping seasonals, which also you had a better chance of if you top ladder. So like it was feeding into all 3 of them. And so it's nice that like it's kind of worth nothing. There's some amount that it's worth, but they like really swung the other way with how much ladder matters for your ultimate like points.
I'm of the opinion that nothing much will change on that front in terms of who you see topping.
It won't.
I don't think it
will. I
will.
enjoy playing tournaments more than I play ladder.
100%. And I think that's an extremely fair point. The point I wanted to bring up is that there's been an argument for like the last 3 years in Runeterra that, I'm not a good player on ladder, but I'm really good in tournaments. And I don't think that has generally held up except for very few individuals. And those individuals who it's held up for are the ones that only play wacky stuff like on ladder. And then they actually take tournaments seriously. Whereas, like, for some, they're just like, oh, no, the best of 3 format just suits me better. And I always do better in that. And usually you can chalk it down to they got lucky in a couple tournaments in those situations. But over time, the consistency just doesn't hold up in the same way. So I'd still encourage people to, like, obviously practice and stuff on ladder. But as CardGamer said, it's a lot more open to practice because you don't get as heavily punished. And like you said, Phansora, you're allowed to actually go in and your skill with one, like your LP with one deck level, you don't really hurt yourself by playing, like, let's say you're a 600 LP deck on Aatrox, but you're only a 200 LP player on Plunder. Well, you don't get punished the moment that you switch to Plunder in the same way that you would in the past, which is cool.
It's, I get what you're saying, but it's sort of feeling like I don't have to play ladder anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, playing ladder for like top 700 just for qualifications wasn't really an issue ever, but playing it for 7-2 seeding, that's something I had to grind for, and not feeling like I have to do that if I want to have a significantly better chance of making it feels better. So,
well, it's going to be funny because people are going to go into the BO3s and all of a sudden going to feel very similar about that eventually. Where you're going to be like doing, say, I don't want to play BO3s like this. I want to play my fun decks because it's going to get sweaty eventually. So
yeah,
it's just transferring it to somewhere else.
We're
it's
gamers. We'll find something.
Who would ever play fun decks on ladder? That's crazy.
Yeah. Who would have fun in my video game?
Hey, my claim to fame is playing Infinite for seasonal stuff.
Yeah, this guy's claim to fame is being anti-fun.
What do you mean? It's the most family-friendly deck there is.
Yeah, you put the kids to sleep with it.
Yeah, literally.
I don't know, man.
Cure for insomnia, just all sorts of things.
Yeah, at least you did an Infinite Trinithan's son on stream.
Who did that?
I don't know, man. Some monster.
Did someone?
Some monster. I wonder who Shadawx.
Listen, you can ask Narcotis and Manasia. They both lost to Avon, and they're like, oh, Shadawx, why don't you Infinite this guy? And I'm like, okay.
Trial by fire.
Wait, Manesia said that?
The way the world works.
Manesia told me a story that just like completely lines up with this earlier, but it was a different thing. I totally believe that Manesia told you to do this.
Hey, it's their fault for losing to Avon, okay?
Yeah, dude, Avon is different. That's all I gotta say. Okay. We've been going for an hour. Mm-hmm. Do we want to talk about patch notes real quick before we end off?
Yeah, we can quickly touch on it, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I just want some cards to get buffed, really. I think most of the decks in the game kind of suck, except, like, Jinx and Aatrox, and, like, some other decks are, like, fine, but, like, not quite to that level. And, like, I want more decks like Jinx and Aatrox and Plunder and Gwen that, like, win the game and, like, feel powerful.
I mean, there are cards that win the game. I think the reason why decks suck is because how reliant current decks are on their cards that win the game early enough into the game.
Well, that's because, like, the rest of the cards in your deck suck. So, like, oh, I need to hit my cards that win the game, or my deck doesn't do anything. like
half the meta is a draw champion win game deck.
Yeah, because, like, you're playing 30, like, bad cards. Like, I want to play less than 30 bad cards. Like,
I'm with CardGamer on that, too. I'd prefer to see more things buffed. I think the meta is more interesting when you have a lot of very powerful decks. I think when it comes, it's very interesting because I don't know if balanced metas are always the most fun metas. For context, I think sometimes we look at balance as like the key indicator and stuff. The most balanced metas over the last year have been some of the most boring ones for me to play in. Just because like you don't have like the standard thing to counter, or your stuff doesn't actually do cool, interesting things, and you're just waiting for it. It feels like playing like Foundations again, where I'm like Ash LeBlanc. I'm like, okay, cool. Like this deck like kind of does its thing half the time, and then half the time I'm just sitting there annoyed. So buffing some stuff for me is a bigger priority than any of the nerfs. Obviously, I think they'll take a look in some respect at Jinx. I hope they don't just revert Jinx. That would suck because Jinx was like an ass champion for like a year before that. Obviously, she's probably a bit too good right now, but just looking at little things across the board, just give me more stuff to play rather than giving me more stuff to play by making the good stuff bad.
I agree with what you said about balanced metas as it pertains to best of 3 format and not ladder. I think when there's a clear, like when it's an unbalanced meta, when there's like fairly clear top tier decks that are just running up and down ladder and you've played nothing but the same matchup,
well,
I think that's not
It's
fun.
A good thing we just spent the last 10 minutes talking about how ladder doesn't actually matter anymore, huh?
Exactly. So, like, best of 3 unbalanced metas are interesting because you are, like, you're able to hedge against certain top decks and then play against the other ones, and you can choose which one you want to play against.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, generally. There's an extent, though. I think, Aatrox, in between hotfixes this meta, like, I was deep in Aegis, like, with my team, and, like, that was not a fun meta with, like, top decks. That was, like, your lineup, it was Bandle City PNZ, and it was Aatrox. And if you weren't playing those 2 decks, you were trolling. And, like, that isn't that interesting. You cycle between, like, 3 third decks. That's not very interesting. But, like, most of the time I do agree with you. And I think that is a little bit of an issue of, like, things are too strong, but also not enough things are strong as well. Because, like, when other things are strong, there's, like, stuff that can kind of stand up to, like, Seraphine and Aatrox. But, like, the closest thing we had was Gwen, who was, like, definitely losing to both of those decks, but, like, it wasn't losing that bad, so, like, you can play it.
I think it was beating Kane Aatrox, but...
You think old Gwen was beating Kane Aatrox? You think old Gwen was beating Kane Aatrox?
I was playing a lot of...
You're just playing against bad players
old
at
Gwen?
that point.
4-3 Reckoner
no,
Gwen.
New Gwen.
I'm talking between hotfixes.
Oh,
yeah. When, like, Seraphine and Aatrox were just every lineup. Like...
Oh, that was, like, good Kane Aatrox. Okay,
yeah, sure. That was, like, fuck. That was, like, messed up Aatrox. That was, like, when Bane Aatrox was the best deck.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I just want to shake up. I can't think of anything, like, right off the top of my head that I want, like, nerfed. I can't think of anything I'd also want, like, really buffed, but I'm sure there's, like,
Twisted Tree
couple things. No, I ain't James, man. I wouldn't mind, but I don't know. Like, one... I don't know. I've played Valmaul before. That card sucks.
Summon it attacking.
Oh yeah, that's actually a good idea. You know what? Make a Shuriman too. You know, I could put that in Talia's Ziggs.
I think one of the best indicators that the best decks aren't actually like super super strong right now, even, is the fact that I don't think any of them were even in top 4 in NA. Like you didn't really see it. I don't know if there was a Jinx deck in top 4. There might have been
Discard
one
aggro.
Kane.
Yeah,
FGW
right.
made it.
It was the
FGW.
third best Jinx deck was the one that was in there with discard aggro, and I think there was maybe one Kane Aatrox, and Kane Aatrox wasn't represented like at any of the finals. I think once you get to that point where like your best decks are that counterable, you're in a pretty decent spot with that stuff, and just if you can get other things up to the power level, like so that the counters are more consistent against the rest of the field and stuff, you get into something that's quite interesting.
Yeah. Like, bro, the best deck in the game lost to FTR and Ravenbloom. Like, are you telling me that's a good deck?
Yeah, like.
So I guess one last.
I will say, as far as like wish list for patch notes, I don't really have any. Like, what I would want is like, you know, the top decks maybe touched a bit, and then because they're not like in need of like hard nerfs, and then, you know, yeah, buff everything else up the same. And this is what they've historically done with all these sorts of like bounce patches where they shake everything up. So I feel like I have high hopes for what they're going to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you feel about?
I think you might see.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, how do you feel about changes just for the sake of changing the meta? Like, even if it's not needed, you know, like for example, like nerfing Aatrox to the ground just to
that
like,
was their
swap it out from the meta, you know, like things like that, like nerfing Gwen just a bit so it's not top anymore, even though, you know, it's not like, I wouldn't say it's like a problem child thing, right? It's just like a good deck, right?
I don't think it's super necessary, like, at the moment, but like I don't think I'd mind it too much. And like their stated goal a little bit ago, I think it was Ruben, that they measure success of these changes by how much it changes up the meta. And I think that's, yeah, I think I'd be fine with that if they just nerfed Aatrox to the ground. I think a lot of people would be unhappy because I think people like that deck. But
yeah, more changes just for the sake.
I do think it is interesting to
shaking it up.
I think you have to be really careful with that because, again, we're looking at it from a competitive perspective where we have access to every card in the pool, and not from a new player perspective or someone who plays casually where they just got the cards up to that point. And if you're constantly making changes for something that people have to acquire, you get yourself into a tricky spot where someone's like, oh, I finally have a deck, and then it's not playable anymore. I think you can kind of set that standard for... I think Fiora Shen was a good example where Fiora was basically rotated out, right? And it was a deck that was in the meta for over a year, right? And it was like everywhere for over a year and had significant PR. If you get to that point, sure. I don't want to make changes to like tier 2 or like tier 1 decks just because they've been tier 2 or tier 1 for like 6 months. Draven Ezreal is another good example that lasted for like a year and then it kind of got pushed out. The only one that's even coming close to it right now, and it would be still another two and a bit months whenever the anniversary of the playcast changes, is maybe Heimer Chase. Maybe. And because that deck's like not even that good.
I think Gwen Cat has way more of an argument for that, even though that deck only popped up like 6 months ago.
August. It wasn't even 6 months.
It was showing up a little bit in July, but like August it really took
like
off.
It's the same cards, but it's arguably a different deck than it was back then.
The Ship of Theseus in Runeterra.
It really did.
So that's what
I'm not saying like burn it down, see what rises from the ashes, but like if they took Aatrox and they, you know, obviously you have to be very careful with this, but like if they made like a tier 2.5 deck instead of the tier 1 it is right now, just to shake things up, I think that would be fine.
You can do that. I just think like what Cup said, it's just going to feel really bad for like the other sect of the player base. And I think the way I would rather them do that, generally speaking, especially with like the new cycle they have, is I think it's a lot more interesting and generally like a lot healthier for like the longevity of champions and having things be like playable and having things be able to crop back up when the meta is favorable to them, to introduce cards that are effective against these strategies, as opposed to just gutting the strategies themselves. Like we're
literally,
getting
if you buff
cards in
Ionia,
March, like I'd much rather get like cards that can effectively deal with Aatrox in some way through like equipment removal or like some sort of like effective removal that is like especially effective against Aatrox, maybe something that hits like transform units or something like that,
like
right?
Darken.
Yeah, something
If
that
you
Darken?
have a single deck from Ionia that's playable, Aatrox's win rate like craters because Unworthy Soul just absolutely destroys that deck, and it's not that good. Even if you guys look at it from the perspective of the beginning of this patch, Aatrox was a 50% win rate for the first like 3 weeks that it came on. The only reason its win rate climbed was because the decks that it was good against, Lulu Jinx, were the most popular decks in the format, and then it went up like 1 to 2% every single week because the meta ended up being favorable for it. If you end up, and this is why I wanted like to say like the buff thing is more important, because if you have a really strong, even if there's, let's say there's a strong board-based deck, like let's say Pantheon becomes like the best deck in the format, for example, right? Pantheon Ferris for some reason got some sort of buff. I don't think that's necessary, but it's just for this example. Or like Varus Cultists, right? That deck gets buffed, and it's the most popular deck. This deck sucks now, right? There's things that are good and that are there, and it's why personally I'm more intrigued by what they end up buffing than what they end up nerfing.
Yeah.
I do think buffs are always more interesting because it's always something new. I will say that I think the argument isn't quite as good if we had a much more higher power level. The fact that we have like a lot of space between like the game's historical power ceiling means we have a lot more space to buff stuff and have like more interesting meta. But like if we do have decks that are like, you know, very low agency, you just like curve out and the game's effectively done by like turn 5 or 6 every single time. Something like that, like Kaisa, for instance. You know, obviously they're going to be outliers, but I do think when like if you had like a meta where you get a lot of very strong low agency decks, even if it hasn't been around that long, I think it is still warranted to like nerf them.
Oh, like you definitely need to do nerf sometimes, even with like strong high agency decks. Like I think we were in a spot like that about a year ago. Yeah, like you can say last meta, but I was gonna say like a year ago, like when we just like killed every 2-drop over the course of 3 months. Like like first bot, then Baboon,
you're still
then like
Baboon,
Conch, then Bright Steel, then Broadwing. Like everyone died every 2-drop. Like we lost so much power from the game, and like at some point that has to happen. But like we're still recovering from that.
Well, that's one thing that I think rotation will be really good at handling.
For sure.
It means you don't have to do these sorts of things quite so much, just because you can rotate it, and then hopefully you don't just like leave Eternal by the curb.
They said they were gonna do the best patches.
Yeah. Also opens will be Eternal formats as well.
Sometimes.
Yeah. It's gonna rotate basically as well.
Yeah, it'll definitely be supported. I wouldn't be worried about that.
I'm still reeling from my 2-3 chefs.
Revert, please.
Yeah, but yeah, rotation I feel like does a lot of it's a nice knob to turn to handle some of these sorts of issues.
Speaking of turning knobs, we've been going for almost an hour and 15 minutes. It might be time to shut this one down, boys.
The classic, we should end soon. Half an hour goes by.
Yeah. So, any last minute things you guys want to say, or any shout outs or wrap up you want to do, Cup, as the guest?
No. Shout out again to Floppy for winning back to back in NA. That's really cool to see, and I think I speak for everyone when we're all super excited for competitive and what rotation's going to bring, and seeing the crystallization of the new plan moving forward for Runeterra. It looks exciting. Trust in the dev team. They've been super communicative, and once any issues that do arise inevitably during beta are ironed out, it's going to be really fun to play.
For sure.
Agreed.
And I think with that, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good night, and make sure to check out patch notes and the new format next week. Will be very exciting. Take care.